It's the International Soccer Preview, and we are Soccerphiles Canada. Welcome to Series 28, looking at the groups and teams of the 2024 Copa America. This episode is looking at the players of Paraguay. Here we go! Hello and welcome again to the International Soccer Preview by Soccerphiles Canada. I'm Kevin, and we continue Series 28 on the groups and players of the 2024 Copa America. This episode covers Paraguay's players. It is, in fact, part 2 of the player media cast, and here we look at the selections. In part 1, we made a list of the candidates and introduced them and their likelihood of making the squad. And there is a link to that, part 1, in the show notes. This episode, part 2, will be divided into 3 sections. In section 1, we'll take a quick look at their preliminary squad and their warm-up games. Section 2 is the main part of the media cast, where we look over the list that we compiled in part 1 to see who made it and who didn't. And in section 3, we summarize surprises in the selections and review injuries. Let's begin then, and we'll begin by talking about their preliminary squad. And there was none for Panama. For Paraguay here. It was a 26-man preliminary or 26-man final squad published on June 15th. And so there was no need to cut any players. There had no preliminary squad. And there was no late replacements, which we did see with some teams. So the 26-man final roster that was published are the players on that we'll see in the Cup. Let's talk about their upcoming games. This was an interesting situation for Paraguay. We saw that they changed their manager 2 games into World Cup qualifying. That was in October. The new manager was in charge of the October games. So only 4 World Cup qualifying games. And then they didn't have friendlies in March, like most teams did, March 2024. So we were really at a loss, the new manager making some changes, but we didn't get a hint of those changes in March 2024. Well, we're supposed to get a hint of them in the warm-up games, and we had 3 warm-up games for Panama. Most teams played 2. Most teams played them in the USA, but not Paraguay. They played them in the home countries of the teams that they played. And we're not too interested in the scores, but just out of interest, they played Peru on June 7th in Peru. That was a 0-0 draw. On June 11th, it was Chile in Chile. That was a 3-0 loss. But they ended on a good note on June 16th in Panama, where they won 1-0. But we're more interested in the lineups of those games. So let's give an overview, and then we'll talk about it as we go through the positions. Really, it doesn't shed that much light either, because we find in most positions the players changing from game to game. So we don't really kind of get the formation of what might look like their starting lineup in the Cup. Just players playing 1 or 2 games. Only in one position do we have the same player playing 3 games, which gives us a hint that that player will be the starter. Otherwise, it's really speculation. Okay, let's go on and to the main part of the media cast, the selection of the candidates. So we begin with the manager. He was not fired or anything before the Cup. So we'll consider Daniel Garnero as having been selected for the squad. He will lead them through the Cup here. Goalkeepers, we have 3 likely candidates, and we begin with surprises here. Only one of them made the squad. That was Carlos Coronel. The other 2, Santiago Rojas and Juan Espinola, despite being likely candidates here, were not selected. We go down to our retired candidates, and we find that one of them is selected, Alfredo Aguiar. So we'll give a little information on him, since we basically just mentioned his name in part 1. Alfredo Aguiar is 36 years old. Has been with Paraguay since 2015, but only 3 caps for the national team. He was part of the Copa America 2015 squad as a backup keeper, and also in the 2019 and 2021 Copa Americas as a backup keeper, but never really got much field time. The reason we had considered him off the team was that he last appeared in September 2022. But here he is back again. The third selection for Paraguay is a new name that we add to the list here. It's Rodrigo Morenigo. He is 25 years old, but has no caps for the national team. In fact, he had never appeared on the squad, even on the bench. But he did appear on the bench in all three of their warm-up games prior to the tournament. So Rodrigo Morenigo, a surprise selection there. Let's look at the warm-up games to see what happened, and at least kind of more along the lines of what we expected here. It is Coronel starting all three games. Carlos Coronel, the only player who started all three games, and so a pretty clear indication that he will be the starting keeper in the Cup. Okay, let's move on to central defense. And we had a definite candidate in Gustavo Gomez, and he was selected for the squad. We had two likely candidates, Fabian Balbuena and Omar Alderete, and both were selected for the final squad there. Below that, we have none of the candidates we listed as seemingly off the squad or retired selected in this category, but we do have a new candidate here, which is no surprise. There's only three selected. This makes it four, which is still less than expected, but we have Gustavo Velasquez selected. He is 33 years old and has never played for the national team. 0 caps and 0 goals. His club is Newell's Old Boys in Argentina since 2023, and he played in Juarez in Mexico before that. He actually was selected, I believe, on the bench in 2017, so he returns after an almost 7-year absence to the team, but still has not got a cap for the national team. He started, but he did actually start 2 of the warm-up games prior to the tournament and was on the bench for the other. But it's hard to imagine that someone brought in from the cold like this would be a starter. Anyway, Gustavo Velasquez at least selected for the squad, and let's look at the situation in central defense. I'll tell you that in part 1, we predicted that Romero would be a definite starter, in our opinion, and that Omar Alderete was the most likely to start beside him. Now we'll look at the warm-up games. We have Balbuena and Alderete in game 1, and then Gustavo Gomez and Alderete in game 2, and Balbuena and Alonso in game 3. So no really clear indication there. Gomez and Alderete are favorite candidates. Both started, Gomez only started 1 game, so that's a bit of a surprise. It was Balbuena and Alderete starting both games. Again, kind of unclear as to who the lineup will be in the Cup. We still kind of favor Gomez. He's the captain of the team. But we would kind of guess that the third game there would look like the starting lineup, but it doesn't seem that way. The new candidate, Gustavo Velasquez, I said started 2 games. He started 2 games as a right back, despite being coded as a central defender. So we'll see if that changes. But that was the first game and the third game. So not only is he coming back from the team after a 7-year absence and 33 years old, he's starting 2 games and looking like the most likely candidate now as right back. On top of that, he scored the only goal against Panama. So that looks good for him. We'll talk about it a little bit more when we get to the right back position. So if he is a right back, that just leaves them with the three central defenders, quite thin in that area. Let's move on to the left back position. Here we have Junior Alonso, who we did see doubled as a central defender in one of the games there. He was a likely candidate here, and he was selected. Junior Alonso, in fact, he's primarily coded as a centre back, so could cover in that position. Our other likely candidate, Matthias Espinosa, was selected, and we have a new candidate here also. Actually, before I mention him, I'll just say that are possible but unlikely, or players seem to be off the squad. None of those were selected, and so we have the new candidate, Nestor Jimenez. Nestor Jimenez is new to the squad, just appeared for the warm-up games, and he too started two of them, just like Velasquez on the left, on the right. Nestor Jimenez is, he is 26 years old, 27 years old, and he plays for he has been with Paraguay just since the warm-up games, just two caps for him there. His only two caps. He plays for Libertad in Paraguay since 2016. His whole career has been in Paraguay. So Nestor Jimenez, another surprise selection. And when we go to the warm-up games, we're surprised that he started the second and third game. So he kind of looks like the starter here. Junior Alonso started the first game, and then we saw that in the third game he was a central defender. So maybe well, we'll really have to see in the Cup what becomes of all that. Maybe Junior Alonso moving back to central defense and Jimenez, the main player on the left. Okay, on to the right, and we'll look at the candidates that we had here. By the way, we had predicted that the starter on the left would be Matthias Espinosa, but we personally thought Junior Alonso. What happened in the end, basically, is they brought in a new player, Espinosa not even getting a sniff there. Okay, now we'll move on to right backs, and we were really uncertain as to who the starter would be here. Just various players in the position over the 8 games that they played in 2023, and we had Robert Rojas as a likely candidate. He was not selected at all, though. We had Alberto Espinola as the first of 3 possible candidates, and it turns out he had an injury doubt. We'll actually leave that until the end and just say that Espinola was not selected here. The second possible candidate, Ivan Ramirez, was selected, and the third one, Juan Jose Cáceres, not selected. Nor was our possible but unlikely candidate, Ivan Perez. Well, no new candidates here, but in a sense there is. The player coded as central defender, Gustavo Velasquez, seems to be a right back, and as we said, started 2 games and scored a goal. So right now he is looking like the most likely candidate to start in this position. Okay, up to the midfield. So a lot of surprises so far here. Up to the midfield, and we look at defensive and central midfielders in kind of one gulp. So we have defensive midfielder Andres Cubas. He was a likely candidate, and he was selected for the squad. And possible but unlikely, we had 2 candidates there, Ortiz and Jimenez. Neither of those selected. Richard Ortiz and Gaston Jimenez, neither selected. Up to central midfield. No, we have a new player to introduce at the defensive midfield level also, and that is Fabricio Peralta, brought into the squad. So again, a player who had never appeared on the squad until called up for the warm-up games, and he started one of those 3 warm-up games and was on the bench for the two others. Fabricio Peralta, because we didn't meet him in part one, we'll introduce him, is 22 years old. No caps for the national team, plays for Cruzeiro in Brazil since 2024 and was in Paraguay prior to that. Actually, he was loaned out to Flamengo in Brazil in 2021 also, as I think that's Brazil's, I think that's the youth club there. Anyway, Fabricio Peralta, a new candidate here. Let's move to central midfielders, where we had Matthias Villasante as a definite candidate. He was selected for the squad. Here we had 6 possible candidates, and the first two, Diego Gomez and Alvaro Campuzano, both were injury concerns that we knew about and mentioned in part one. Whether that injury kept them out or whether they simply weren't selected, we're not sure, but we'll talk about that more in the injury summary at the end. The third of the 6 possible candidates, Richard Sanchez, was selected. The fourth and fifth, Brian Ojeda and Matthias Galarza, were not selected, but the sixth one, Ernesto Caballero, was selected. And also our possible but unlikely candidate, Damian Bobadilla, also selected for the squad. So more surprises here. 6 possible candidates, and yet the possible but unlikely candidate was selected. Okay, that is central defensive and central midfielders. We saw in part one that it's not really clear what formation the manager prefers, but he did use the 4-2-3-1 in 2 of his 4 games, and then different formations in each of the other 2. In the warm-up games, we see always 4 at the back, which had been the case for Paraguay, but we see a 4-2-3-1 in the first 2 games and a 4-3-3 in the last game. So that gives us 2 midfielders, and the ones we expected to be starters, Villasante and Cubas, did start together as a pair in the first game. However, in the second game, Peralta, the newcomer, replaced Villasante, and he played alongside Cubas. In the third one, we see Villasante coming back in as a left midfielder. So he played 2 games. We have Caballero and Matias Rojas, who we'll meet later in that 3-man midfield. So Cubas getting 2 starts and Villasante getting 2 starts. And then 3 players getting 1 start in there. So it looks like the manager's main aim was to basically give everyone at least 1 game of field time here, but it doesn't really indicate to us who's going to be starters. We would probably stick with what we said, which is Villasante and Cubas as the starting pair, and probably in a 4-2-3-1 formation. Okay, that's the central midfield. For candidates in left midfield, we didn't talk separately about the position because the new manager hadn't used a 4-3-3 with a left midfielder and a right midfielder, but we do have a surprise selection. Durlis Gonzalez making a comeback. So we did introduce him as a player who seemed we put him in the retired category or off the squad for the long term. And that is true. He last appeared in November of 2022. And yet here he is selected for the tournament. Another surprise there. So we won't go into too much detail on him, but he's 30 years old now, 50 caps and 9 goals for the national team. So has been a bigger part of their past and plays for Olympia in Paraguay now. He was with Dynamo Kiev in Ukraine for 5 years before that, and was part of Copa America since the 2015 Copa America all the way to 2019, but basically off the team after that, not selected for the 2021 Copa America, and he did play after that in November 2022 as his last appearance for the squad. So another of many surprises here, Durlis Gonzalez on the squad. No right midfielders to speak of, so we move up to the left attacking position, and we only had one candidate here, and it was at the definite level, Ramon Sosa, and um, he was selected for the squad. We weren't actually 100% sure that he would be the player in this position, though, because we felt that they would want to get Almiron and Enciso on the field. So let's see what happened in the warm-up games. I think we did nominate him as the starter, but we did have that concern. Anyway, in the first game, he did start Sosa. In the second game, it was Angel Romero, who we're going to meet as a surprise selection forward soon here. And in the third one, it was Enciso. However, Sosa was playing as the right attacker in that game. So he does look like a starter, Sosa here. Again, the message not really clear. Among right attackers, we had a lot more candidates. We had Miguel Almiron as a likely candidate, and Matias Rojas also a likely candidate. Both of those were selected. We had Julio Enciso as a possible candidate. That was largely that he played a lot. He missed a lot of games due to injury, so we weren't really sure. But we personally felt he was an important player for the squad, and he was selected. The other possible candidate, Ivan Leguizamon, was not selected, and nor was the possible but unlikely Jesus Medina. And that's it for the candidates. We thought on the right side that Miguel Almiron was the most likely starter. We had him in green, so confident that he would be a starter. Julio Enciso, we kind of thought he would be a starter, but it looks like we weren't bold enough to fully commit to it. So we had him in a blue highlight as a probable starter. Let's look at those players. We do see Almiron starting in the first game there. And in the second game, it's Romero. He's an attacking midfielder who we'll meet right away. So a lot of switching around here. And in the third game, he didn't play either. So Almiron, just one start there in the first game. I wonder if that means they wouldn't start him, but kind of hard to imagine. As far as other players go, we have Matias Rojas starting as the central midfielder in the first game, and Enciso as the central midfielder in the second game. The third game is a 4-3-3, and we saw that Enciso started as a left forward in that. So again, a lot of switching of positions, but it does look like Enciso, the only one there to play two games, is, as we thought, an important player, and we still think he will probably be a starter. Okay, central attack. Well, we basically looked at the players who played the position. Let's look at the players coded that way. We had a likely candidate in Alejandro Romero Gamera, and he was selected for the squad. And beyond that, we had no other candidates, and we did see Romero getting one start, but that was as a right attacker in the second game. So again, leaves us in a bit of doubt as to whether he will be a starter. We actually didn't nominate him as a starter based on his appearances leading up to the Cup. On to the forward line. And here we have some of the biggest surprises of all. We had three likely candidates, and two of them didn't make it. The first one was Gabriel Avalos, the second Adam Barrero, and the third Antonio Sanabria. And the only one of those selected was the one without tournament experience, Adam Barrero. So only 3 caps for the national team prior to the warm-up games, as opposed to 16 for Avalos and 32 for Sanabria. So the manager really favoring youth here. That may not be a surprise that he's basically rebuilding the team from scratch here, but two likely candidates not selected is a surprise. Our possible candidate, Hector Villalba, is another player who had an injury concern that we knew about in part one. Again, we're not sure whether that injury is the reason he was not selected or whether he simply wasn't selected because he was only at the possible level here. We had three possible but unlikely candidates. None of them made it, but we do have a player who was seemingly off the squad making it, Angel Romero. So everything I said about new players goes out the window because they bring a veteran in from the cold to play in this position. So Angel Romero last played in June of 2022. I'll give a bit of a bio because we hadn't talked about him in part one. So he's 32 years old now, 41 caps and 8 goals since 2013, and he's playing for Corinthians in Brazil, his second stint with them actually, having played in Mexico and Argentina between his first and second stints there. He was around, as we saw, since 2013, but not selected for any of the cups until the 2021 Copa America. He was on the preliminary squads for both the 2016 Copa America Centenario and the 2019 Copa America, but only selected for the 2021 Copa America, where he started all 5 games. So seemed to finally become a starter for the team, but not really, because in June of 2022, he had his last appearance for the national team. Now he's back, so we'll see how much he gets on the field. We did see him appear in one of the warm-up games. We also have a new candidate here, and that's Alex Arce. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. I'll say Arce. Alex Arce is 29 years old, but just 3 caps for the national team since 2024. So a newcomer, because those are caps that he earned in the warm-up game. He started one of the warm-up games and subbed into the 2 others. So Alex Arce plays for LDU Quito in Ecuador, and played in Argentina briefly before that. So Alex Arce, let us see what happened in the warm-up games. I'll say first of all that Angel Romero did get a start, but not as a forward. It was as a left attacker in the second game there. In the first game, it was Alex Arce getting the start, so the newcomer tried out immediately. The second game, Adam Barrero was the starting forward. These are all just single forward positions. In the third game, Barrero again. So I guess we can expect to see Adam Barrero starting in the Cup, having started the second and third warm-up games. Wow, so a lot of surprises there. Actually, not a surprise that there are a lot of surprises, because it is a new manager who hasn't had a lot of time with the team. So we have a lot to do in section 3, reviewing. So we'll review the surprises. We'll go a little faster here. Having said that, I delayed. Okay, let's go to surprise non-selections or notable non-selections. We have 5 players who we considered likely candidates who were not selected for the squad. 2 of them are goalkeepers. So Santiago Rojas, a likely candidate not selected. Juan Espinola, also not selected. If we had a bit more time, I would tell you why we thought they were likely, but you can review part 1 if you want to know the details, I suppose. Next is central defender Robert Rojas, particularly surprising because they're a bit thin on central defenders. He had been playing as a right defender, I must say, but he is coded as a central defender. Gabriel Avalos, a forward, not selected, and Antonio Sanabria, also a forward, not selected. So 5 notable non-selections there. Surprise selections, we'll begin with players kind of brought back to the team. Goalkeeper Alfredo Aguiar, We had considered him off the squad. He last appeared in September 2022. He was selected. Left midfielder Derlis Gonzalez last appeared in November 2022, but called up to the squad. And then forward Angel Romero, called up, having last appeared in June 2022. We also had Damian Bobadilla, a central midfielder who we considered possible but unlikely. He had his first appearance on the bench in October 2023 and hadn't started any of the new games, just subbed in for one and then not selected for the last two matches. So one appearance as a substitute, but Bobadilla selected for the squad. He plays for Sao Paulo in Brazil and is 23 years old. We have five new players that we have. The first one, Gustavo Velasquez, coded as a central defender, but actually started two of the warm-up games as a right back. Pretty interesting history behind him. We talked about it in the main section there. Fabrizio Peralta, defensive midfielder, new to the squad, had never appeared before. Same with Nestor Jimenez, the left back, new to the squad. Actually, it's the same for all five candidates except Gustavo Velasquez, who was born or brought back after a 7-year absence, but effectively new to the squad. Two, Alex Arce, the forward, the fourth of the new players, and then the fifth one, Rodrigo Morinigo, the goalkeeper, brought in to the squad. So wow, lots of changes. Let's finish up by updating the injuries. And really, we had no kind of likely or definite candidates with an injury concern. They're all at the possible level. We have four names here to talk about at the possible level. So in every case, we can't be sure if the injury was the reason that they weren't selected or whether they simply weren't selected and wouldn't have been even if they were fit. But let's go through them. Alberto Espinola, the first one. I can't remember if we mentioned his injury concern in the first one. He had been out with a cruciate ligament tear in November 2023. But in part one, we had assumed he was recovered since he wasn't on the injury list. However, he was back on the injury list by the time the warm-up game came around. So we're a little confused about that. As we say, it looked like he had recovered from the injury, and now he seems to have the same injury again. Anyway, Alberto Espinola not selected for the squad. The others we knew about, Diego Gomez had been out with an ankle injury since late April. We thought he might make the squad because he was expected back on June 30th, but not selected for the squad, whether due to injury or non-selection. Alvaro Campuzano was out for knee surgery since mid-May and had an unknown return date. We didn't expect that he would recover in time, and again, not sure if that was the reason. Finally, forward Hector Villalba, also a possible candidate. He had been out with a cruciate ligament tear since November 2023, just like Alberto Espinola there. So we thought he might recover in time for the tournament, and perhaps he did and simply wasn't selected. We don't know. Okay, that is one of the more exciting part twos with a lot of surprises there, and we'll see how these changes in the tournament work out for Paraguay. We would like to thank Paul Udin and Pixabay for the wonderful background music accompanying this mediacast. The piece is called Victory Epic Music.